Something extraordinary is unfolding in England's skies again. After decades of secrecy, the government has finally released what experts are calling the clearest UFO images ever captured. And they are jaw-dropping. Now, old reports are being revisited, and shocking new details are emerging.
It's weird, I've never heard anything like that. Where's it coming from?
From mysterious encounters in quiet villages to sightings near top-secret facilities, England's UFO history is being rewritten.
Well, it was one ordinary day. I was waiting for my husband to come home from work, and my two sons went to Staffordshire to school, and I was getting changed, and I heard this terrific noise. It was just like a giant cauldron of water being poured onto a fire, a shh sort of noise, you know. And my first reaction was, oh, the children. I thought maybe a plane was crashing or something like that. And I slipped my jumper on and went outside to find my two sons lying flat on the ground in the garden in front of the house, shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, there's a flying saucer."
Government hides UFO picture. It all began with a photograph that the government didn't want the world to see. In August 1990, two men set out on a quiet evening hike near the small Scottish village of Calvine. They had no idea that they were about to witness what would become one of the greatest mysteries in modern UFO history.
It has been called the greatest UFO photo ever, and I agreed. In fact, I've had a picture of the Calvine photo on my wall for the last year.
And that the evidence they captured would be hidden by the government for more than 3 decades. As the men reached an open field, they noticed something strange in the sky. It was a vast, diamond-shaped object floating silently above the landscape. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, and seemed to be hovering with impossible stillness. One of the men said that the UFO they saw was too strange to be anything familiar. Terrified, they quickly hid under a cluster of trees and peered from there. They could see the object clearly. It was metallic, symmetrical, and almost elegant. There wasn't any propulsion or exhaust, and it had no wings or blades. It wasn't like any human-made aircraft. Instead, it was hanging in the sky and barely making any noise. To make the situation even more dramatic, another figure entered the scene.
Not only that, we also see a Harrier jet trailing the object. As soon as this photo was released to the public, people went crazy. It was a big deal.
They saw a fighter jet moving through the clouds and banking toward the diamond-shaped craft. They began to wonder whether the jet was chasing the UFO or simply observing it. But it became clear that the government knew about this strange visitor. One of the hikers lifted his camera and took 6 photographs of the UFO. Moments later, the diamond-shaped object shot upward into the clouds and then vanished. Just like that, it had disappeared. When the pair developed their photos, the images were crystal clear. These were probably some of the clearest photos of UFOs ever taken. In the photo, you could see a massive geometric craft suspended in the air with a jet in the same frame. They were excited about what they had just seen, and the photos, and so they took the negatives to the Glasgow Daily Record. The newspaper's picture editor, Colin Allen, agreed to publish their photos. He immediately saw how extraordinary the images were. But before he published it, he hesitated. The highlands were surrounded by RAF bases, and Allen feared the hikers might have photographed a secret military aircraft. He wanted to be cautious, so he sent a copy of the best photo to the RAF press officer, Craig Lindsay. He didn't expect that it would cause his photos to disappear. Lindsay was shocked too and forwarded the photo to his superiors. Immediately, The Ministry of Defense launched an investigation and demanded all 6 photos and negatives. Then, they told him to forget the whole thing. The story never ran. The hikers never came forward. And the photographs disappeared into government archives. For over 30 years, the world forgot about the Calvine UFO. Witnesses from that time revealed that the 2 men worked at a nearby hotel. But after that sighting, 2 men in dark suits arrive at the hotel to speak to them. The hikers were shaken after the conversation, and within weeks, they had both vanished, leaving no trace behind. Their names were always redacted from all official documents. To this day, no one knows who they were and what became of them. But one clue survived. On the back of a surviving print of the photograph that later resurfaced, written in red pencil, was the name Kevin Russell. Investigators searched for people with that name, but no one wanted to admit it. Now, let's fast forward to 2021. Journalist and UFO researcher Dr. David Clark was working through declassified Ministry of Defense UFO files when he received a tip from a retired RAF officer. And you guessed it, Craig Lindsay. Lindsay revealed that he had secretly kept a single copy of the original Calvine photo all these years, hidden in an envelope. When Clark saw it, he realized that he was holding what many would later call the most convincing UFO photograph ever taken. They called a photography expert, Andrew Robinson, to carry out forensic analysis and check the photo. He confirmed that the image was authentic, with no editing or double exposure. The light, weather conditions, and materials all matched the date and location. Based on the proportions in the image, the object was estimated to be about 30 to 40 meters long. Despite that, no one knew what the UFO was, but it was definitely not a human aircraft. Under the UK's standard 30-year rule, the Calvine UFO files were meant to be released in 2022. But just as the date arrived, the Ministry of Defense quietly extended the classification by another 55 years. The files are now sealed till 2076. Although MOD says it's to protect the identities of the individuals involved, UFO experts say that this might be a cover-up. For now, we only have the single photo hidden by Lindsay, and it shows us a shocking view of a UFO spotted over 3 decades ago. Now that Lindsay has released the photo hidden by the government, the world has questions about what was really captured. Was the Calvine object a top-secret military craft being tested? Or was it a deliberate hoax? But the most likely definition is that it's a UFO, something beyond the limits of human technology. No one can say for sure. The hikers are gone, and most of the photos are hidden. But whatever those men saw was enough to terrify 2 witnesses, silence a newspaper, and make the British government hide the truth for 80 years. But this UFO sighting in England is just as shocking as the Somerset abduction, which many call the most disturbing UFO encounter in Britain. Somerset abduction. This terrifying mystery started on a quiet October evening in 1973, when a woman who was called Mrs. V set out on a drive through the winding country roads of Somerset. The night was calm, and the air was thick in silence. She was heading home, but didn't realize that in the next hour, her life and what she thinks is true or false would change forever. As her car drove along a lonely stretch near Langford Budville, a sudden flash caught her eye. A strange, bright light hovered low over a nearby field, pulsing like something alive. Her car's engine sputtered, the dashboard lights dimmed, and then everything went dead. She was curious, but also afraid, and stepped out to check under the bonnet. But before she could reach it, she felt a hand clamp down on her shoulder. She turned around and froze. What she could see was a robotic giant over 6 feet tall, with its head glowing with a faint purple light. Then everything went black. When Mrs. V woke up, she was no longer on the road. She was lying in a field beside a metallic, bowl-shaped craft that seemed to hum with low vibration. Then, beside her, there was a robot, standing motionless and watching her. She was about to scream when the humming sound grew louder, and she lost consciousness again. The next thing that happened was even stranger. When she woke up again, she found herself in a circular metallic room that was bright, sterile, and cold. She was lying on a table, unable to move. The robotic being stood to her left, and nearby, there were 3 humanoid figures wearing surgical clothing and moving quietly around her. They didn't speak. They simply worked and examined her as if she were a specimen under glass. She could only remember flashes, like a device hovering over her body, samples being taken from her hands, and something sharp pressing against her. Then there was a moment that was so disturbing she could barely speak of it. One of the humanoid beings assaulted her. It was clinical, mechanical, and devoid of emotion. She couldn't fight or scream, but she could only endure. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The next thing she knew, she was standing beside her car. The engine started, as if nothing had happened. The UFO, the robot, and the field were all gone. But the clock on her dashboard showed that nearly 3 hours had passed. She drove home in silence, shaking, and wondering whether she had just lost her mind or stumbled into something no one else was meant to know. For weeks, she didn't tell anyone. When she finally confided in her husband, he told her to see a doctor. The doctors also dismissed her story as delusion. Yet, her fear was real. What's more, there were strange circular marks on her skin that remained there for days afterward. And that was proof of the UFO abduction. Then came the letters. Anonymous notes warned her to keep quiet. Phone calls came in the night. To make things worse, 2 men in dark suits appeared at her home, telling her the incident was not in the country's best interest. So, she decided to stop talking about it altogether. It wasn't until 1977 that UFO researchers Barry King and Andrew Collins finally documented her story under the title A Terrifying Ordeal in Somerset. Even today, it remains one of the most disturbing and mysterious accounts in British UFO history. Maybe it was a hallucination, maybe it was a classified military encounter, or maybe it was something else entirely. Something that left its mark not on her body, but on the boundary between fear and the unknown. But this isn't the only sudden UFO sighting that shocked many in London. UFO over Parliament. In June 2015, a startling video emerged showing what seems to be a massive alien mothership hovering directly over the Houses of Parliament in London. Taken by a bystander on the embankment below Big Ben, the footage captures a large dark craft that was silent and motionless. The craft had no exhaust trails, rotor wash, or visible means of lift. It was definitely not an airplane, helicopter, or even a drone. It simply hung there, above the building and the Thames, and those who saw it couldn't believe their eyes. The video quickly found its way into the hands of UFO experts around the world and sparked an international wave of intrigue. Analysts note the ship's size, as it was at least 700 feet across, way bigger than helicopters, blimps, or any known aircraft. The shape suggested a triangular structure that was sharp and precise. It stayed in place for a few minutes. Then it slowly moved westward before it disappeared without a sound or flash. Londoners froze in place as they captured the moment, and their phones recorded what many say is proof of an extraterrestrial visitation in the heart of the United Kingdom's political power. Although this is the largest UFO sighting that has been spotted over the Houses of Parliament, there have been other sightings near this place. In February 2008, a witness reported seeing a craft hovering opposite the Parliament building with distinct green, red, and white lights. It remained completely static in the sky for about an hour and a half, all while conventional aircraft passed by. These sightings come from declassified documents released by the Ministry of Defence, with the report saying that an object was hovering opposite the Houses of Parliament in a clear sky over central London. But the MOD says that there was no corroborating evidence to suggest that the craft represented an unauthorized breach of UK airspace. Still, UFO researchers are looking into these cases and wondering whether there's a reason why UFOs have been spotted close to a government building. Are aliens spying on us? That's a question that experts are wondering, especially when looking at the Rendlesham Forest incident. Rendlesham Forest incident. The Rendlesham Forest incident remains one of the most mysterious and compelling UFO encounters in history, often called Britain's Roswell. It all started on a quiet night, December 26, 1980, at RAF Woodbridge. This is a base in Suffolk used by the United States Air Force during the height of the Cold War. While the world was still recovering from Christian festivities, security personnel were patrolling the East Gate, and they noticed strange red and blue lights moving above the trees, descending into the forest nearby. Their first thought was simple. They expected it to be an aircraft in distress, but what they were about to witness was one of the most shocking UFOs in history. Curiosity led them into the forest. First, they drove in, but then, when they couldn't move with the car anymore, they came down to walk in. As they approached, they noticed a glowing dome of light in front of them, illuminating the trees. Static filled the air, and all the men became afraid of what they were about to see. Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston was called in, expecting perhaps to find a downed A-10 aircraft, but nothing prepared him for what lay ahead. Standing in the forest, he was facing an object unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was a triangular, black and glossy object, surrounded by a strange, milky gray and yellow force field. There were circular lights along its surface, shifting and changing in different patterns. Peniston's companion, John Burroughs, became frozen in place. He couldn't even move because he was shocked. Peniston was more afraid as he examined the object closely, even touching the strange markings etched on the side that looked like hieroglyphs. Suddenly, his mind was flooded with streams of binary code, which seemed to be a transmission of extraterrestrial information, and it left him both exhilarated and unnerved. Before he could take in what was happening, the craft rose silently into the sky and disappeared. The next day, Peniston returned to the site and found physical evidence, proving that what they saw the night before wasn't just a hallucination. There were 3 indentations in the ground and broken branches high in the trees. Over the next nights, more lights appeared, and this was witnessed by many people. The lights were moving erratically above the forest and behaved differently from any normal aircraft. The government couldn't take it anymore and sent Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt to start a formal investigation, equipped with night vision devices, cameras, and Geiger counters. What they found was shocking. They recorded radiation levels that were nearly twice the normal background at the site. They also saw pyramid-shaped craft, beams of light projecting to the ground, and smaller objects lingering in the air before vanishing. They tried to record the evidence, but the film was also damaged, and they believe it was because of the radiation emitted by the aircraft. Today, experts continue to investigate the Rendlesham Forest incident and those who witnessed it. But a couple of years before that, a family in England found themselves facing something that would change their lives forever. 1954. UFO sighting. In the quiet countryside of Staffordshire, England, an ordinary afternoon in 1954 became one of the most extraordinary UFO encounters ever reported. For Mrs. Wustenberg, it was like any other day. She was waiting for her husband to return home from work while her two young sons played outside. But then she heard a strange, thunderous sound, which was like a giant cauldron of water being poured onto fire. She was afraid that it was a plane crash and rushed outside to find her sons lying flat on the ground, pointing toward the sky and shouting, "There's a flying saucer!" She thought it was childish excitement, but looked up anyway, and she couldn't believe what she saw. Hovering just above the roof of her cottage, there was a massive silver object shaped like a Mexican hat, smooth and gleaming in the daylight. It was so large that it completely blotted out the view of the roof and chimneys. But what truly froze her in place was what she saw inside. Under the transparent dome, there were two beings. They didn't look like monstrous aliens, but tall, graceful figures with long golden hair and soft, beautiful eyes. They looked human, almost regal, and were dressed in pale blue one-piece suits that shimmered faintly. Their faces were calm and compassionate, and for a moment she felt a strange connection. Paralyzed with awe, she couldn't move and only stared. The beings gazed back, expressionless but peaceful, their larger-than-human eyes fixed upon her. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the craft was gone. When she looked again, it had vanished completely. Moments later, her sons spotted it high above them, circling the sky 3 times before streaking away like a flash of light. Shaking and terrified, Mrs. Wustenberg locked herself and her children inside the house, hiding under the kitchen table until her husband came home. Later, she was ridiculed by locals and dismissed as having imagined the whole thing. But she still remembers what she saw, and the story remains one of the most human UFO encounters. This might seem shocking, but in another community, a shocking UFO was spotted, and experts are still trying to find out the truth. UFO drones above England. It began in the quiet evening skies of Norwich, England, with a strange light hovering above the fields, motionless, silent, and unlike anything anyone had seen before. When local resident Mary stepped outside her cottage and raised her phone to the sky, she took a picture that would send ripples through social media. The image showed a large metallic triangular craft with bright, symmetrical lights glowing against the twilight. With no sound or movement, it was just suspended in the air. Within hours, others across East Anglia reported seeing the same thing. They saw identical triangular formations gliding silently over farmland and near military installations. The object seemed to defy physics, moving with a precision that no known aircraft could match. Yet, when the public asked questions, the Civil Aviation Authority and Ministry of Defense had nothing to say. Then, the story grew even bigger. In September 2025, airports in Copenhagen and Oslo were forced to close for several hours after giant green glowing drones appeared in their airspace. Thousands of passengers were stranded as the objects hovered, then vanished without warning. That same week, green laser beams were spotted across the skies of Britain and the United States. These beams were so bright, they lit up the clouds like searchlights. Anonymous, the hacker collective, claimed these lights were part of secret tests involving directed energy weapons, technology capable of disabling electronics or neutralizing targets from afar. Experts, however, remained cautious, calling for investigation but admitting privately that they had no clear explanation. Now, all across England, people are watching the skies more closely than ever. From the UFO photos being resurfaced to the stories of abductions, Which of these do you think are the most surprising UFO situations in England so far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.